All right. Greetings, everyone. Okay, it's 10:50, so we'll go ahead and get started. So, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, folks who join in that type of time zone. My name is Brother Clyde Ledbetter. I'm a professor of African World Studies, and I spent a decade of my life as an organizer in the All African People's Revolutionary Party. I'm not currently active because I live in a space without a work-study chapter, but that is no fault of the organization, anything like that. So the ideology and the training that I got from the AAPRP is one of the things that will guide me in this discussion this afternoon. So essentially what I want to talk about and what I want to present is an idea of modernizing our political education processes in particular, but with the ultimate vision. And the title got a little lost in translation as I was coming up with my abstract. I didn't catch that till right now. But essentially what I want to discuss is building an all-African institute for strategic intelligence and assessment. That's the larger goal. How do we build a digital space? Ultimately, once we get to where we need to get politically, a physical space where we can share information, strategic intelligence, and assess what we do as we build to this objective of Pan-Africanism. And even once we ultimately, because we will win, achieve the victory of Pan-Africanism, that doesn't stop the need for us to collect, share, and disseminate strategic intelligence and to constantly and continually assess what we do, all with the goal of ensuring the people's happiness, the people's development is front and center. How do we build a consistent institute for that? So the inspiration for this talk largely comes from my time again as a member of the AAPRP, but also a few other experiences and observations. The one is this, the Young African Leaders Initiative that was a neo-colonial creation of the Obama administration in 2008. I remember seeing this as a graduate student and thinking this is on par with AFRICOM as being one of the worst appendages of the neo-colonial regime. Because what this does, this targets the African youth. And it wines and dines them in DC and New York. It brings them together to share this experience. You'll meet leaders or misleaders or colonial puppets such as Obama and others. And it creates a ready-made group of folks destined to become neo-colonial puppets unless they go through the political education processes that we talk about. I don't think anybody is beyond re-education. Anybody can be rerouted to fulfill their revolutionary potential. But this is insidious. But it's also something that we can learn from, because there is something in the socialization process of things like this. And as revolutionaries, we can do that. We can mirror this for our revolutionary activists coming up. We can create initiatives such as this to bring the revolutionaries of South Africa, Zimbabwe, Kenya, Ghana, Zambia, Brazil, the US, Canada, the UK, and anywhere African people find themselves together in a political education program, which is what I'm talking about today, so that we can create moments like this, but revolutionary moments like this, and not Yeah, I'm sorry. But that was a misnomer. But again, it's the idea of statistical intelligence is part of it. I can't run that discussion because I'm not I'm not a mathematician, but maybe you can. So again, my thinking for this comes from my experience in the AAPLP, where all organizers go through what is called work study. Work study. Every 2 weeks, we meet, we do political education, we discuss geopolitics, and we learn what it means to be an organizer, and we learn the ideology of Nkrumahism Touréism. I went through that process for 9 years consistently. I learned from people such as Brother Jibo Sabukwe, Brother Yerua Koti, Brother John Trimble, who gave a presentation earlier, Brother Sabukwe, who's presenting while I'm presenting, Sister Njiba Ferrewat, and others in the Pennsylvania, Maryland. But then even when I traveled abroad, when I went to the Gambia, I was in a work study circle in 2012 with our brothers in the Gambia. So I understand the value of political education, and not just learning the ideology, but being in a group with teachers. Like, I mean, I really have to give so much credit to Jibo Sabukwe. I mean, he was my political education teacher. And having these back and forth conversations and really in making the ideology real. So having that experience, and then also having the experience of a teacher, because before I'm anything else, I'm a teacher. I'm a revolutionary teacher, but I'm a teacher. I love my craft. I love my vocation. And I've been able to, over the past few years, even before the pandemic, really learn how to teach online, and seeing how online education can be a tool for revolutionaries, particularly online political education, really excited me. Currently, I'm a visiting professor at the Virginia Commonwealth University. I've never stepped foot in Richmond, Virginia. I've never been physically at that university. Yet for the past 2 years, I've been a visiting professor. So this is the type of world that we live in. And in addition to that, I also teach community African history courses online every Saturday for the past almost 4 years. And these have grown to include folks from all over the world. So I've experienced what can be done with that. I've experienced how we can use this technology in a way to build our political education and to work on that coordination that was talked about in the previous session before this one among our various organizations. Ultimately, what I'm envisioning for an All-African Institute for Strategic Intelligence and Assessment, when we get to, as we build this is something that's going to take time. Ideas such as political subjects such as political education, language training, so that we can interact with each other, not just in English or French or Portuguese, and that will break down a lot of the barriers that we have between us and make our organizing easier. We need language training. We need training in public policy. We need training in macro and microeconomics, applied technology, physical training. And everything that I'm saying here can be started online. Now, I'm not talking about us sharing information about the strategies of our organizations and what we are doing as we're currently engaged in our struggles wherever we're at. But the education aspect, we can do this online. We can do this online. Net assessment, ultimately. Net assessment is a tool used by governments to compare themselves, particularly militarily, with other forces. You analyze where you're at, you analyze where your enemy is, and you make decisions based off of that. We can do that. We can do that. So this is the ultimate example of this. And my training as a teacher, I wish I could see you all, but we can use the chat for this. What other areas do you think, and Nigel says we just launched institutions. So again, if this exists, I want to support, I want to help, I want to be involved. This is just my thinking. So if we have parallel thinking, I want to be involved, because what I'm going to present at the end is a curriculum for the political education piece. Because one thing about conferences, one thing with me with conferences, conferences to me are like cookouts. And to come to a conference and just talk about something like this and have no concrete plan or at least start about how to accomplish it is like coming to a cookout with a book of recipes. What are we supposed to do with this? We got to get started. Even if it's not the best meal, it's better than coming with a book of recipes. We got to actually actualize what we're talking about, even if it's just getting a start. So, Nigel, if it already exists, let's build on that. So, in addition to the subjects we see here, what else could be added? And folks could put in the chat. What are some other ideas that you think of things that if we had an institute where we could share strategic intelligence, we could assess what we're doing, what else could be added to this list? What are some other ideas that people can think of? And you could just put it in the chat. Like I said, I wish we could talk about it out loud, but we could just put it in the chat. All the social sciences, anthropology, sociology, public and reproductive health, definitely health. I don't know how I missed health, development economics. Health is so key. I have physical training there because, a lot of the pandemic, you saw a lot of people do things online. We can't fight the revolution if we got, get out of breath taking 2 steps. So we can do some online physical education, peace and security. So many areas. And many of us on this call, because I've seen the list of participants, many of us on this call have many of these skills. And some of us may actually be teachers that we can utilize this and bring us all together. And I'm going to use the subject of political education, which I'm most familiar with. I teach political science and I also teach African studies. So this is my area and my contribution to this conversation. And the way I'll talk about it comes from Vote M. You're anticipating me, which is good because a lot of these things are definitely what I was going to engage in. So I'm going to talk about political education. What I'm proposing is a standardized basic political education training, Pan-African political education training program. We have a number of organizations, political parties, revolutionary forces on this call, on this conference. And what I've seen this morning, I've heard familiar language. I've heard familiar names, in the names of Nkrumah, Garvey, others, familiar ideas and concepts. So we're all pretty much getting very similar political education. So a part of the coordinating of our efforts, we have to study and train together. And, 30 years ago, that may have been incredibly difficult. I mean, that would have been incredibly difficult. We're all operating across the globe. We're all doing different things. And every now and again, maybe there's a conference or a Pan-African Congress or something that we get together and we realize we're sharing ideas. But now, and one individual had to travel and we're sharing information that way. But now we can do it in real time. We can have new recruits to our organization as they're learning our particular ideologies and strategies within our own formations. They can also get together in real time and go through a standardized basic Pan-African political education training program. And this is something that Nkrumah anticipated. And he didn't anticipate the internet and how that would look necessarily, but he talked about this. He talked about this in the handbook. He talked about what political education should look like. He says, every fighter, and we're all fighters, whether we want to acknowledge that or not. Neocolonialism ain't going to end itself. We're all fighters. Every fighter must know against whom he's fighting and why he is fighting. Political education should center on the key motive for the war, the will to be free. Our essential objective is to build a socialist society promoting better living and working conditions for all, a socialist society under a union government of Africa. Each recruit, and I'm taking this right from Nkrumah, I'm not changing anything that Nkrumah outlined here. We're just going to change the way that we do it. So instead of us being physically together in a liberated zone or in a liberated area of a contested zone. We can do this virtually. Each recruit, during the course of his training, attends classes in which ideological aspects of our struggle will be explained and discussed. He will study each subject. For example, African history, Pan-Africanism, socialism in Africa and the world context, and imperialism and neocolonialism. Teachers will encourage recruits to express their own views and to discuss any current political, social, economic, or religious problems which, sorry, my screen got, which may interest them. Discussions between, this is the key point. This is the key point. Discussions between recruits from different parts of Africa will be particularly valuable in stimulating mutual understanding and dedication to the common ideal of continental liberation and unity. That's key. And we can do this, just like we're doing it now, but on a consistent basis. As a teacher, consistency is key for me. Being there, having a present, constant presence, a place where all the organizers know. When you become a new recruit to Azapo, when you become a new recruit to the PAC, when you become a new recruit to the PDYS in Gambia, when you become a new recruit to the AAPRP, you're going to go through our individual training processes. But at some point, we're going to put you together with a cohort of new recruits from all over the African world, studying the same subjects so that you get to socialize and form that coordination. So as you develop into cadre, we have these networking connections. It's easier for me to support and understand the efforts of what's going on in Zimbabwe if I know somebody, I personally know a comrade in Zimbabwe. We went through this process together. We debated. We read the same material. We talked. We got to know each other a little bit. We told jokes. We did this. That way, if I ever travel to Zimbabwe, I know what's going on firsthand on the ground in Zimbabwe. And then I can use that information to bolster what I'm saying to folks in Chicago, to bolster what I'm saying to folks in Colombia, to bolster what I'm saying to folks in the UK, to bolster what I'm saying to folks in Trinidad. So it's not only just for our own political edification, but it's also a way for us to even recruit more people. We have a program in place that connects you with Africans all over the world. All over the world. Here's my suggestion of what this would look like. A 16-week, four-month program of basic political education as outlined by Nkrumah. We could do 3 cohorts a year. This curriculum would be something that would be agreed upon by the various political parties, organizations, revolutionary forces that would like to be a part of the Institute and training program. We would get together, we would discuss what this curriculum would look like. But if we follow Nkrumah's plan, he has these 4 subjects. So it would be 8 sessions. And this is just basic. We're not trying to get nobody a PhD in African history or socialism. Just basic political education. 2 times a week for 4 months. One cohort starts in January, finishes in April. Second cohort starts in May, finishes in August. Third cohort starts in September, finishes in December. Every month, a new subject. We can use different teachers from our, one second. Sorry about that, the wind in Jamaica's pushing these doors. Every cohort would meet for the month, discussing that subject, then move on to another subject, move on to Pan-African, move on to socialism, move on to imperialism and neocolonialism, studying the same materials, engaging in online discussions, and doing exactly what Nkrumah said to do in the handbook, sharing experiences. I would love to be in a discussion group with brothers from Ghana, sisters from Ethiopia, brothers from Brazil, sisters from Tunisia, or Somalia, all together, learning, sharing ideas. how this would look, what this curriculum would look like, at least what I'm proposing. African, Nkrumah has African history, but I want to be very clear that we're talking about African people's class history. I don't want to talk about the history of just, all right, this kingdom rose and this kingdom rose. That's good. That's good to know. But we're talking about the history of African people's class, what Touré called the people's class. So session 1, why study African people's history? Session 2, technology and innovation in ancient times. Session 3, justice and worker struggles in ancient times. Session 4, female rulers and defense in ancient times. One of the things, if you start studying African history, you'll see very clearly is the role played by queens, queen mothers, and other female leaders, particularly in the defense of Africa. That's why I put that image of Queen Amani Reynolds from Sudan there at the bottom. Migration and state building in ancient times. Economics and trade in ancient Africa. The Zon's Rebellion, where Africans are taken out into southern Iraq and they rebel against their exploitation there. We should teach that. Political structures in ancient Africa. All of this, not just designed to know facts and figures, but the lessons that we can take from our people's long struggle for justice against all forms of exploitation, and struggles against all forms of anti-development. So 8 weeks, 4 weeks for this, 2 sessions a week. You read, you get together, talk about what you read, the teacher facilitates a discussion, and then maybe at the end, I didn't think about this far, but we have an assessment for each recruit to see how much they retain. And then we go to the next month. An example of what a session could look like. So we start with why study African people's history in the first place. The reading would be Walter Rodney's speech in 1968 at the Conference of Black Writers in Montreal. He gives his speech, African History in the Service of Black Liberation. Recruits would read it. Then the teacher would lead them through these discussion questions. On a scale of 1 to 10, we start. What's your knowledge of African history? How much do you know? What are some of the primary arguments that Rodney's making in the piece? What's the relevance of this speech to this era? So that's how we start. I mean, we would start with get to know everybody. Where's everybody from? What organization do you represent? All of that. Building those bonds, and then getting into the session. We could be last from an hour and a half, 2 hours, twice a week. And we can change the time zones because to make it so that, some people ain't on at 3 o'clock in the morning, but some people might have to be on at 3 o'clock in the morning one time, and then we switch it to another. So we can work all of that, all those types of things out. But it can be done is what I want to get at. Then we move on to the next month, Pan-Africanism. And these are just suggested topics. Again, I don't have any ownership of this. I'm just presenting an idea. So we can talk about the beginnings of Pan-Africanism and the rebellions against enslavement and the importance of the Haitian Revolution. We can talk about the contributions of Henry Sylvester Williams. And I have Booker T. Washington because behind the scenes, Booker T. Washington did a lot for the Pan-African movement. Du Bois, the Ethiopianism on the continent that swept through Southern Africa and East Africa and Central Africa, and the Garvey movement. We could talk about the Pan-African Congress of 1945, the All-African People's Conferences, the independence movements and the imperial backlash, the Ethiopian Revolution, and the examples of Thomas Sankara. Then we could talk about the OAU and the AU and assess them for the strengths and weaknesses, talk about what Gaddafi was trying to do compared to what Nkrumah was trying to do, and all this. All of these elements of Pan-Africanism. We can run through this history and these ideas. And I'm going to go fast for the sake of time because I want to make sure we get to Q&A. Then socialism, but not teach socialism the way that we normally do it, which is socialism as a philosophical idea, where we spend a lot of time. And I mentioned this as a question in the session with Jared Barr earlier, is we need to start showing our people how socialism works and explaining to our people how socialism works as an economic and public policy. Not just capitalism is bad because it exploits people and the private ownership of the means of production and all that. Yeah, but what makes socialism work? What are the ins and outs of it? And on a basic level. And what are some examples that we can show our recruits, as well as to teach them to show the masses as we fight for Pan-Africanism, how socialism works. We need the key principles. We need to study macroeconomics. I don't know how many people on this conference are economists. I'm not an economist. I would never attempt to teach this class because I don't know it. And I think as part of our assessment and constant assessment of our movement, we need to recognize that we are not recruiting enough economists. When I read Nkrumah's Neocolonialism, when I read The World in Africa by Du Bois, or How Europe Underdeveloped Africa by Rodney, or I read Capitalism and Slavery by Eric Williams, and you look at all those charts and numbers and figures, and I'm just thinking to myself, what today in 2022, do we have a text, do we have a teacher that can do that, that can break down the political economy in that way? Public administration, when we get power, when we control liberated zones, how does that look? What do you need to do to ensure that the people's development is happening? Public, you can't just, get into power and then figure out what to do. We need to have some basic understanding of public administration on a very basic level. And all these things can become more advanced, but we need to basically understand it. We need to understand that's exactly what I'm talking about, Obioma. That's exactly what I mean. We haven't recruited enough economists, so therefore all the ones that exist, they're Western training ones. But we can, I believe in the power of political education. We can turn some of these people. I think we can turn some folks, or we need to do a better job of pushing our people. Say, look, you want to be part of this political party? You may be a part of this organization. We need you to study economics. You have an affinity for mathematics, an affinity for these things. We need you to go. The party will finance this. The organization. We need you to go over here and learn this so you can come back and teach it. We need to make that a priority. We need to prioritize that. This is a blind spot in a lot of our organizing. We need to get back. We need to do it. And we need to show people examples. The Cuban example. They've been running a socialist economy and attempting to run a socialist economy since 1959. And in terms of the people's development, if you look at Human Development Index, is one score that I like to use because it's relatively fair, even though it's in the UN, it's relatively fair assessment of how people are doing. How has Cuba been able to do that 90 miles away from the greatest imperialist power in the world? We need to study that, and not just study it to feel good, but really look at the public and economic policy. What was going on in the Libyan Jamahiriya from 1969 to 2011 that made it the highest human development in Africa? We need to look at it. We need to study it. We need to study what's going on in Venezuela. Venezuela's having a lot of problems because they're being attacked by imperialism, but we need to study that case study. You have an economy with a valuable commodity that's under attack by imperialism, and you still have elements of neocolonial anti-people aspects in society. How do you build in the face of that? So we need to study it. We need to study all of these things, and we need to have teachers that are able to explain it to our recruits, who are then able to internalize it and make these arguments to the masses of our people. Last but not least, we need to train. The last month would be training on imperialism and neocolonialism. So sessions dealing with the Lumumba assassination, neocolonialism in Central Africa. Watching the films, because it doesn't have to be just reading. We can watch these films like Life and Debt in Jamaica, and the school about the School of the Americas, which outlines imperialism in the West. We talk about French neocolonialism and neocolonialism in West Africa. Session 4, the soft tools of neocolonialism. How neocolonialism uses things like film and television and religion and all these other things that aren't just blatant like Afrikaan. The 1990s in neocolonialism in Southern Africa. The Libyan invasion, we need to study this, and neocolonialism in Northern Africa. Sometimes we act like just because they speak Arabic in Northern Africa that is not part of our assessment. It clearly is. And then lastly, AFRICOM and Yali. We need to assess these things and look for their weaknesses. Look for how folks in that Yali group can be turned, because I believe everybody can be turned. You know, many of our great leaders came from some very bourgeois backgrounds. So it's not It's not like, you know, just because somebody was a Yali student doesn't mean that they can't be. Thomas Sankara went to French training institutes. So this is what we need to do. All right, with the 10 minutes I have remaining, I'll just talk about what remains to be done. Collectively create a curriculum. So anybody that's involved with the political education of your particular formation or chapter, we should all get together and like was mentioned earlier in the chat by Brother Nigel, they've already launched an institution. So maybe we can just funnel all our efforts into that and create this curriculum collectively. So everybody has a say. Everybody has a say of what we're learning. Begin to recruit the first cohort. And we can do this immediately. As soon as we get off this call, we can change information and start doing this. Recruit the first cohort of folks to go through this. Begin the training. And then this is just one aspect of the institute. It's just one aspect of a larger permanent edifice that we can create. This is just a political education a form of it. So this is what I'm proposing, and I'll just share with you one thing, because like I said, it can't come to a cookout with a book of recipes. I started the process of creating the political education curriculum, and I want to share with you what that looks like. I'm just using sorry, not this one. I want to share another one. Sorry. It's this one. I have a number of courses on it. But this is just Thinkific. It's just a simple course management website. It's very easy to use. But it's a start. It's a start. I'm not saying it's perfect, but I'm drafting this. So we start with the African world history, with the discussion questions, the reading, and we just get to it. And I've started creating this website, and with the other 4 and filling it in as the weeks go on. But I didn't want to go too far because I wanted to talk to you all before I went any further. So again, I'll stop there. I'm a teacher. I'm dedicated to this work. I'm ready to work with anybody that is. I'll put my email in the chat, and yeah, and it's going to be and I like that somebody mentioned the accessibility aspect to it. That's key. So it's not that website, everything I'm talking about is free. Anybody that's facilitating class has to be willing to do this work as a volunteer. I never neglecting the masses, but I was just thinking for this in terms of people recruited into our organizations, so that it also consolidates our work together as Pan-Africanists as we build this movement, as we build to the objective of Pan-Africanism. So I'll stop there because it's 11:23, and I know we have to stop at 11:30, and I'll open it up to any questions or comments. And again, I'm ready to work. So thank you all for listening. That's my email there. So if anybody wants to connect with this, and those of you that will be watching this as a recording, I know the organizers have my information. And again, I want to work with any formations to make this happen. I don't want it to just be an intellectual exercise. We're just talking about this. So let's do it. Let's work. Any other questions, comments, concerns? And then again, I want to thank you all for listening. All right. I think we'll yes, no, we need to, this has to be in as many languages as possible, French in particular. I only speak English and Spanish, so I definitely really we want to work with as many folks as possible. Am I engaged in the study circle at this time? Not an officially one for the AAPRP. I do run a class very similar to what I outlined in this on Saturdays. It's really focused on African history. It's for anybody. It's completely free. And I've been doing it for 4 years, and it goes from ancient times all the way up into the present. We just finished a course called Early History of the African Renaissance, and it's very similar to what I outlined here. And then there's some seminars thrown in. So I'm teaching every Saturday at 11. In fact, I'll put the website to that in the chat, so if folks want to register for that. And again, everything I'm talking about, there's no cost, anything like that. There's a course website associated with everything. So there's readings and live interaction. So I'm going to put the registration link to the current class I'm running now, and as well as the readings for the current seminar that is being run as well. Could this be a version for youth? Yeah, we just need teachers to do that. I actually, again, I'm not doing this, I'm not promoting myself. I have nothing to sell or anything like that. I just want to share resources. I actually do have a course for youth that I can share in the chat, and I'll do that. Just give me a second to find it. The last thing I put in the chat was a course for youth. So yeah, I know we have to go to other sessions. We finished a little early, so if you want to copy the links, you can. And we can start from there. So again, thank you all, and look forward to networking with you all as this conference goes on, and we'll talk soon. Forward.